Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. Sorry about that, guys. Having a bit of technical difficulties today with the camera and the mic on StreamYard. I don't know what's going on. You guys able to hear me? See me okay? All right. Yeah, I'm not sure. It seems a little bit temperamental. I don't know what's going on today. My camera wouldn't even show up. It was a bit strange. I updated my Chrome browser and then it seemed to be able to work. But the mic is kind of temperamental too. I move it around very slightly and then it just disconnects. Anyway, so sorry for the delay, guys. 10 minutes or so. Anyway, let's just sort of jump straight into this. The name of the stream is called the Nicene Creed, the Son caused to exist by the Father, with a question mark. So the question that we're going to be investigating is see, there we go again. You guys, how about now? Are you able to hear me? Not sure what's going on. The mic is just keeps disconnecting. Okay, so anyway, the stream, I think it's working now. So the stream is called Nicene Creed, is the Son caused to exist by the Father. Now, I've talked about this several times on my channel. I've recently debated Christian apologist Dr. James White, where this was one of the 5 arguments that I used against the Trinity. And we've been having a back and forth on it. So I figured, well, why don't I do a full video just on this issue? I've also had Dr. Ryan Mullins on my channel before, who is a Christian scholar, and he's written papers on this. So if you haven't seen that video on the Nicene Creed where I interviewed him about it, I suggest that people go and watch that. But what I'm going to do here is a few things. Okay. First, I want to read what the Nicene Creed is. So I'm going to put that up on the screen and read it for you guys. Second thing I'm going to do is clearly demonstrate from the early, and because Dr. White seems to want to be very pedantic. Let's be very specific. I will demonstrate from the early Nicene church fathers that actually commented on and that we have their surviving works. They all pretty much unanimously agreed that the Father caused the Son and the Spirit to exist. Okay? And then we're going to evaluate what that actually means. And then I'm going to obviously explain why that matters and why, as a Muslim, I view that as problematic. And it's not just me, that many Christians, going back even to the beginning of the time and the whole Arian controversy, viewed it as problematic. And then, of course, towards the end and even right now, I'm issuing a formal challenge to Dr. James White on this specific issue of the Nicene Creed, what the Nicene Creed states, what the early church fathers believed in regards to the eternal generation of the Son, and why it matters. I will debate him on this specific issue. And I'm almost sure that he's not going to accept the debate challenge, because I don't think that his position will be able to withstand scrutiny in that debate. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to show what appears to be Dr. White's position, but it's really unclear, because I think part of the issue is that I don't think he really understands, and he thinks that this is quite arrogant of me, but I don't think he really understands the Nicene Creed and what the early church fathers believed about it. And he says, well, he tries to gaslight and say, oh, I know Greek and I know this, and I've taught church history for 30 years. Well, guess what? Almost everyone that's commenting on the posts, on the tweets, is saying that you're wrong. That doesn't mean that you're wrong, but other scholars have done it. And I've quoted so many secondary sources, even primary sources, to demonstrate that I'm actually correct. And Dr. White has not appealed to anything other than himself. He's made himself the arbiter of truth in this regard. And he's just so fundamentally wrong. And he's just doubling down and burying his head in the sand. I mean, that's what's happening. So we're going to look at some of his tweets. And then I'm also going to look at a video that he put out recently, where he was claiming to quote Gregory of Nyssa and go through it. It's about 11, 12 minutes long. And I'm going to show that he didn't really even address the main heart of the problem or the issue. So first, let's pull up, if I can here, let me try to pull up the Nicene Creed in English for you guys. And just so I can show it to you guys on the screen. And that way you'll be able to understand what I'm getting at here. Okay. So 1 second here as I pull it up. Just share my screen here. All right, there we go. Oh, and by the way, we've got a super sticker from the one and only Lopez, $13.99. That must be either his favorite number or he just loves sending $13.99. But appreciate that. And then another thing, we have a new member. So appreciate you becoming a new member. Do consider clicking that join button to support my channel and support my work, inshallah. You just got to click the join button. It's also included as a link in the pinned message of this stream as well. So anyway, let's take a look at the Nicene Creed, which was penned in 325. It was the first what's called ecumenical council of the church. It's generally agreed upon. I mean, it's Catholic dogma pretty much. So it's agreed upon by the Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox, and even the overwhelming majority of the Protestants. It's only recently that some modern Protestant evangelicals have criticized a certain portion of the creed, which is what we're going to look at. So anyway, let's see. This is what the creed says. It says, I believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all that is visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the only Son of God, the only begotten Son of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of one essence with the Father, by whom all things were made, and without him was not anything in heaven or on earth made. Okay, so the main part that we're going to be concerned with here is when it says that the Son, okay, so the Son of God is the only begotten Son of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made. Okay, and what I'm going to argue here is that the early church fathers, the early Nicene church fathers, I'm going to argue and demonstrate what they actually meant by this phraseology here in the text. Okay? What I'm going to show Again, I repeat, I'm going to show first what the early church fathers understood by this terminology from two ways. Their own primary sources. So I'm going to read their primary sources, what they said about it. And then second, I'm going to quote secondary sources, which refer to the Nicene Creed and the early church father quotes in regard to it. So again, I'm not just appealing to myself. This is not an argument from Jake, the Muslim metaphysician. No, this is a clear argument that is going to be based on primary sources of the Nicene church father that commented on it. And secondly, secondary modern sources that refer to those primary sources, and Dr. White is wrong. And again, this is not only about Jake and Dr. White, but it's the reason why I'm framing it this way is because this is the recent sort of discussion and controversy that we've been having back and forth on Twitter. So let's start with the primary sources, okay? And this is one that Dr. White went over recently. Let me just stop sharing my screen because you guys don't need to see the creed anymore. But we're going to be evaluating what this understanding of begotten of the Father, eternally begotten of the Father, what this actually means. Okay? Now note that the early church fathers, this is my claim, understood the concept of eternally begotten to be a type of eternal causation. Now, in our modern understanding of causation, some people may think that that's a contradiction in terms, okay? And I am actually one of those people, but I'm not going to press on that issue that much. Let's grant, for the sake of argument, that eternal causation is a coherent concept. Somebody is saying that my stream is buffering. Am I still buffering, guys? Still buffering or no? Let me know if it's good. Everybody's saying that I'm buffering in the chat. I don't understand what's going on here. Looks like it's not my day today. I'm having problems with the mic. I'm having problems with the camera. Now there's problems with the internet connection, apparently, that it seems to be buffering. I don't know, guys. Is it still buffering? What's going on here? I mean, it's not buffering on my end, so I'm not even sure what's going on. Okay, anyway, people are saying it's back to normal, so let me continue before something else goes wrong. Okay, so where was I at? So I was saying that they had this concept of eternal causation. Now, whether or not that's a coherent concept, let's leave it on the side for now. Let's just grant, for the sake of argument, it's coherent, okay? Now, what I'm going to argue and demonstrate from the early Nicene Church Fathers is that the concept of eternally begotten was a causal notion. So it was the claim that the Father alone eternally causes the person of the Son and the Spirit to exist. But I'm primarily going to focus on the Son, just for simplicity's sake. So St. Gregory of Nyssa, who is a post-Nicene father, and he is recognized as a saint he's recognized as a saint in all traditions. People are saying that I'm buffering, but I don't see any buffering on my end. It's very strange here. What's going on? Am I still buffering? I don't know, guys. You guys are you guys are saying that it's frozen. How's it frozen and yet you're able to hear me? I don't understand. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the stream and try to come back and re-enter. So give me a second because I don't know what's going on here. Okay, I'm back. Is this any better? Can you guys hear me or not? Can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay? What's going on here, guys? Are you able to see me or not? No, I'm not. I'm not getting into restarting the router and the modem. I'm not doing all that. It's not happening. Still buffering. Wow. I've never experienced this before. No idea what's going on here. You guys keep saying pause the stream and come back. I just told you I just came back. Okay, I'm back, folks. Is this any better or not? Am I still buffering? Any better or am I still buffering, folks? Okay, this seems better. Is that what I'm looking at? All right. I have no idea what happened. Everything on my end looked fine. Even when I'm watching the YouTube video, apart from the StreamYard, it wasn't buffering on my end. So it's just very strange. All right, now I got to pull up all this. I had a bunch of tabs open, so I got to pull stuff up. But anyway, I kind of. It's buffering again now. What the heck is going on? Oh my God. It's buffering again. Really? Wow. I don't know what's going on, guys. We might just have to call it a day because I really don't understand what's going on here. You got some people are saying it's not buffering. Other people are saying that it is. I'm not just going to start talking and then nobody understands what I'm saying. Okay, people are saying now it's good. Okay, let's try. Let's try this again. Oh man, this is a complete nightmare. This has actually never happened to me before. The champ said, "We love you." I love you as well. I love you guys as well. I just have no idea. All right, everything seems fine. People are saying go ahead. If it goes sideways again, let me know. Okay. So where I was at last time, so if you watch this stream later, just disregard the past 30 minutes of although there was some stuff in there, disregard the past 20 minutes or so of complete nonsense. Okay. So I was explaining about eternal causation, that the church fathers had a notion of eternal causation. And so I'm saying, well, in some sense, it doesn't really make that much sense, but let's grant it for the sake of argument. All right, it makes sense. So let's see what they actually believe, what the early Nicene church fathers actually believed about the Nicene Creed. We're evaluating this notion of the eternal generation of the Son or the eternally begotten. So I'm going to start going through the primary sources here. First, I think I was mentioning St. Gregory of Nyssa, who is, I mean, if he's not Orthodox, I don't know who or what is, right? So we've got another super chat here. May Allah reward you for your efforts and accept it all. I mean, thank you very much. I mean, so let's take a look at St. Gregory of Nyssa, what he has to say in his work on Not Three Gods. Okay, so this was a letter he wrote to Ablabius, which is called On Not Three Gods. See, I had everything already queued up, guys, and I really apologize because I had everything queued up, and now I'm gonna have to just Google some of this stuff and set it up for you guys to get it on the screen. Unless you guys don't really think that it's all that important for you guys to be able to see it, because I don't want people to think that I'm making these things up, right? Okay. Let me see if I can find it now. Let me see if I can find it here. Okay, where are we at here? Okay, now I'm trying to find it. It's not coming up here. Anyway, I'm just gonna have to read it because this is gonna take too much time. I already wasted too much time. I don't want to keep you guys here. So somebody, Ace, sent a super chat. Loving the work, bro. Keep it up. We're all behind you, and consider PayPal, Patreon, etc. to help you further. No more buffering. Alhamdulillah. All right. So I'm just going to run through this because if I waste time trying to get everything on the screen, it's going to take longer. So, and people can check the quotes if they doubt me, but generally, I don't generally misquote. So, St. Gregory of Nyssa in his work on Not Three Gods, he states this, and I quote, "The principle of causality distinguishes then the persons of the Holy Trinity. It affirms that the one is uncaused, while the other depends on the cause. So the one that is uncaused is the Father, and the Son and the Spirit depend on the cause. So there's a dependence relation and there's a causal relation. Okay? Now again, Gregory of Nyssa, ad Petrum, he says this. Listen to what he says. Since then, the Holy Spirit, from all the supply of good things for creation, has its source, is attached to the Son, and is inseparably apprehended with him. And his being attached to the Father as cause, from whom all he proceeds, he has this special quality of particularity according to the hypostasis, being known after the Son and together with the Son and subsisting from the Father. The Son, who through himself and with himself reveals the Spirit proceeding from the Father, who alone shines forth only begottenly from the unbegotten light, has no commonality. Listen to this. Has no commonality according to the individuating, what it means is basically individuating property or sort of attribute, either to the Father or to the Holy Spirit, but alone is known by these mentioned signs. And God over all, which is referring to the Father, and God over all alone has a special property of his own hypostasis, meaning of the Father, being the Father and subsisting from no cause. And by this sign again, he is also individually recognized. Okay? So only the Father, notice this, aseity, or being uncaused, is not a property of the one nature, essence, or being that all three persons share. No, God over all alone has a special property of his own hypostasis, being the Father and subsisting from no cause. And by this sign again, he is also individually recognized. So the Father alone is uncaused. And what is it? It's not a property of the nature or essence. It's a personal property of the Father alone. Okay? Now, let's see what else we've got here. So I've got a couple more quotes. That's by the way, that was Gregory of Nyssa ad Petrum. So you can find that in his work ad Petrum. Again, okay. Let's go to some other primary sources. Saint Athanasius. Listen to what he says here. And this is from On the Opinion of Dionysius 15. On the Opinion of Dionysius 15, this is what Saint Athanasius says. Okay? Who was one of the, if he's not Nicene, I don't know what is. He is one of the standards for Nicene orthodoxy. Now listen to what Saint Athanasius says. The Son has his being. Notice, the Son has his being, not of himself, but of the Father. Okay? So the Son has his being, not in himself. So he is not Aseity because he is not self-existent, but his existence is from the Father or through another. Okay? So the property of Aseity is the property of self-existence or to be uncaused. Now, the early church fathers, the early Nicene church fathers, okay, had the position that only the Father was uncaused and the Son and the Spirit were caused. So the Father has existence in and of himself. He's Aseity, but the Son and the Spirit are not Aseity. Their existence is through the Father or from another. Now, I've got a couple other quotes here that I want to get to. So that's St. Gregory of Nyssa I've given you. I've given you St. Athanasius. Okay. Let's go to some other people here. Let's go to okay. Let's go to Hilary. Hilary was another early church father. Nicene church father. Listen to what Hilary says. And I quote, "The Father is greater than the Son." Now, notice that when we typically Muslims mention this quote, which is in John chapter 14, verse 28, when it says the Father is greater than I, Christians say, well, that's referring to Christ in the incarnate state and in virtue of his roles that the different persons play within the economic Trinity. But no. That's not how the early church fathers interpreted John 14:28. What does Hilary say? Hilary says, the Father is greater than the Son, for manifestly he is greater who makes another to be all that he himself is, who imparts to the Son by the mystery of the birth the image of his own unbegotten nature, who begets him from himself into his own form. So why is the Father greater than the Son? Not in virtue of the economic Trinity, but in virtue of the ontological Trinity, meaning the Trinity in and of itself apart from creation. And this is Hilary quoting on or commenting on John 14:28, the Father is greater than I. He says, the Father is greater than the Son. Why? For manifestly he is greater who makes another to be all that he himself is, who imparts to the Son by the mystery of the birth the image of his own unbegotten nature, who begets him from himself into his own form. And you can find this on Hilary's work on the Trinity 9.54. Right? Now, Hilary then, well, that's what Hilary said. Here's another quote in On the Trinity 9.56, which he makes it even more clear. The Father, therefore, is greater. Why? Is it because Christ became a human and they have different roles in salvation? No. Sorry, Dr. White. The Father, therefore, is greater because he is the Father, but the Son, because he is Son, is not less. So notice what he says. The Father, and this is kind of nonsense, the Father is greater because he's the Father, but the Son, because he's Son, is not less. And what he's really kind of trying to get at here is that the Son is equal to the Father in the sense that he possesses the same nature, but in terms of origination or causality, or the fact that the Father's uncaused and ase, the Father is greater than the Son. Okay? So now I've given you three church fathers. I've given you St. Gregory of Nyssa, St. Athanasius, Hilary, and these are all Orthodox fathers. These are not some no-name random people. Now notice what I'm going to show. I've got to show this. You guys are going to have to bear with me with time here. I've got to be able to pull up Dr. White's quotes here on Twitter, because I'm going to show what he said, and notice that he directly contradicts the church fathers on this. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. When Dr. White actually said that the idea of the eternally begetting has absolutely nothing to do with originating. And see, he has a misunderstanding due to his modern mind and modern sentiments. He thinks that because we say causation, that therefore implies temporality. That means that there was a time when the Son was not. No, I will repeat over and over and over again. And Dr. White, please stop straw manning me. My position and the early church fathers was this, that they believed that eternally begotten, an eternal generation, was a causal notion that was eternal. It's an eternal causal relation with no time. There's no temporality applied to it. So don't tell me that I'm strawmanning them and saying there's temporality and that there's a time when the Son was not. No, I'm not making that claim that the church fathers thought that. Now, there were a couple super chats, I think, that I may have missed. Super sticker, $5 super sticker. Appreciate that. Omar. I think that was it. Yeah, that was the only other one I missed. Now, let's go to St. Basil. St. Basil, who's another one of the Cappadocian fathers, who is a Nicene church father, right? Does he say that when he comments on John 14:28, again, is he saying that it's only about the economic Trinity and in relationship of the roles that they take in salvation? No, listen to this. And he uses the word originate. Listen to this. Okay. The evident solution is that the greater refers to what? Hold on a second. Listen to this, folks. The evident solution, this is St. Basil, one of the Cappadocian fathers, is that the greater in John 14:28 refers to origination, while the equal belongs to the nature. Now, this is a direct refutation of Dr. White and his misunderstanding of the early church fathers, because he thinks that, and he tried to follow Calvin in this, and don't worry, we're going to get to Calvin, James. Okay. That he believes that the early church Nicene fathers believed that the Father, Son, and Spirit were all ase because they possess the same divine nature, which is ase. But notice, St. Basil is saying that's false. Listen to what he said. Commenting on John 14:28, the evident solution is that the greater refers to what? Origination, while the equal belongs to the nature. And you can find that in Fourth Theological Oration of St. Basil 9, oration number 9. So Fourth Theological Oration number 9. Now, so what Basil is saying is that the Father is greater in terms of origination because he's unbegotten, whereas the Son is begotten. But in terms of nature, they both share the same nature and therefore are equal. Well, guess what? Let's say, for the sake of argument, let's be willing to give it to him just so we can explain to Dr. White what is being said. If it means that aseity and origination and being unoriginate is a personal property of the Father, right? Why does it have to be the case? Well, let's make this very simple. If they're equal in terms of nature, and within the nature is included the property of aseity, well, then how could the Father be greater than the Son with respect to origination? It would make no sense. He's saying the Father is greater than the Son because the Father is unoriginate, whereas the Son is originated. Okay? And again, I'm going to make this even more clear because we got quotes for days. You think I was just coming with some low-level quotation, Dr. White? I'm sorry. You're gaslighting with, oh, Jake doesn't know Greek. He doesn't know Latin. He's reading secondary sources. No, I'm reading primary sources in an English translation. So unless you want to demonstrate that these translations are wrong, I'm sorry, it's not going to fly. A gaslighting tactic's not going to work. Why? Because I'm not quoting one person. I'm not quoting two people. I'm not quoting three people. I'm quoting 4 people, 5 people, 6 people. Okay? So let's go even further. Let's elevate this even further here. Now, let's listen further to what... now, the key point here is that aseity for the church fathers was couched as a personal property of the Father and not in terms of the divine nature that they all shared. How do we know this? Because how could Basil say that each one of the persons are equal in terms of nature if only the Father is ase and the Son and Spirit are not? That means he's couching aseity and unorigination in terms of the personal property of the Father. Now, let's show this even more clearly. Here's St. Basil again, and I quote, "That which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause, for it would share the glory of the unoriginate, because it is from the unoriginate." Listen to that. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm being very charitable and clear here. The church fathers did not think that the Son and the Spirit were less divine than the Father. They didn't think that. Okay? But what they did think was that the Father's aseity was a personal property of his alone, that the Son and the Spirit were not self-existent or ase. Notice, not only do we have the word cause, we have the word originate, and we have the word unoriginate. Again, I quote, "That which is from such a cause," speaking of the Son and the Spirit, "is not inferior to that which has no cause." So now he's comparing the Father with the Son and the Spirit, and he's arguing that the Son and the Spirit, that although they have a cause and the Father has no cause, so notice, Father no cause, Son and Spirit cause. But the Son and the Spirit are not inferior. Why? For they would share the glory of the unoriginate. Why? Because they are from the unoriginate. Now that's clear. The Father alone is uncaused and unoriginated, whereas the Son and the Spirit are caused and originated by the Father. Now, this cause and origination, or the fact that the Son and the Spirit originate, is not temporal. They did not believe it was temporal, but it was a dependence and causal relation that was eternal. So, now we're going to compare that with Dr. White. We're going to compare that with Dr. White's quote. Listen to this. Now let's compare that with Dr. White's quote. Now give me a second here, guys. Bear with me, because I've got to dig through some of Dr. White's quotes here on Twitter. Give me 1 second, guys, because I'm going to show where he actually uses that exact language. He actually uses that exact language and says that I'm incorrect. So let me see if I can find it here. Okay. Let's see. 1 second here. Trying to find his tweet. It's going to be a shame if I'm not able to find this. Really, it'll be a shame. Okay. The Twitter is so annoying. Okay, I think I found it. I think I found it here, folks. Let's take a look at this. Watch this. Watch we compare what St. Basil just said. And I guess St. Basil didn't know what he was talking about either. You know, maybe, I don't know. Maybe James White's going to turn on. When I make this so clear from the early church Nicenes, maybe he's going to turn on them. I don't know. Maybe he's going to turn on them. So let's look at this. This is a tweet that I put out. I said, good morning. And I posted this video, which we're going to take a look at in a little bit. The church fathers didn't think that the processions were temporal, but they were causal. To be ase is to be uncaused. Only the Father is uncaused, and the Son and the Spirit are caused by the Father. Therefore, they are not ase. Okay? That's what I said. And then further, that was my argument. My argument had nothing to do with temporality. They thought that aseity was a personal property of the Father, not of the shared divine nature. I'm wondering why you didn't address this issue. Okay? Now let's look at how Dr. White responds to this. Okay, let me see if I can find what I just found there. 1 second here, folks. Got to pull this up. This is very clear. And there were even other Christians commenting on it saying Dr. White didn't know what he was talking about and that he was completely wrong. So look at this. Look at this. Ase refers to ontology. Ontos equals being, existence. Father and Son are relationships within a single being. The relationships are atemporal, meaning they're not temporal. I agree they're not temporal. If you can, and then he goes on to talk about another thing. But let's evaluate this first. Ase refers to ontology, being or existence, right? Now, let's look at this. Let me remind you what I read from St. Athanasius. If on ase let's go with it for the sake of argument. Aseity refers to ontology, ontos, being or existence. Listen to this. St. Athanasius says what? The Son has his what? His being, not of himself, but of the Father. Therefore, by your own standards, if aseity refers to ontology and ontology refers to being, the Son does not have his being, his existence of himself, but it is of the Father. So you're wrong right there, buddy. Incorrect. Even by your own standards, the Son does not ase. By your own definition that you gave right here. Because you're saying aseity is ontology and ontology is being, and St. Athanasius, who was responsible for partly responsible for the Nicene Creed and a major proponent of the Nicene Creed in terms of it being propagated, and there's no question about that. Okay? He says what the Son's being is not of himself, but it's from or of the Father. So that's clear, my friend. Now, let's go even further with this. Okay, so 1 second here. Let's see. Okay, 1 second here. Okay, again. So again, Hillary says this. He is not the source of his own being. I want to let that sink in. Speaking of the Son, which can be found in his work on the Trinity, he is not the source of his own being. It is from the Father's abiding nature that the Son, what? Draws his existence through birth. Now we got two things, Dr. White. See, I'm locked in, loaded here. You think I'm just quote mining? No, I've read this material. I've got the quotes to back up what I'm saying. Apparently, I don't know if you didn't read it or this just went right over your head. I have no idea. I'm sorry to be so frank about this, but it's just over and over and over again. I've been trying to provide evidence, and you're saying that I'm wrong, that I don't know what I'm talking about, and you're trying to gaslight me? No, it's not going to happen. You're saying Aseity refers to ontology, and ontology refers to being and existence. Well, I showed you from St. Athanasius that he says that his being is not of himself. It's through another. So he can't be self-existent, which is Aseity. Then again, I'm showing you here in Hilary. You want to throw Hilary under the bus too after St. Athanasius? What does Hilary say? He is not the source of his own being. So again, the word being. It is from the Father's abiding nature that what? So we dealt with being. Now in another quote, that the Son draws his existence from birth or through birth. So we got you on being. We got you on existence. Now, okay, so now let's go to another quote here. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. If I missed any super chats, guys, I apologize. I'm going to try to scroll up and get to them. Okay, because I was on a roll here. All right. I missed one. Sophia, bro, Jake, where can I send you my support for when I won't be able to do month by month? I want to just add it up and send you 2 or 3 years worth at once. I did have a PayPal account, but something happened to it. I'm not exactly sure, so I'll get back to you on that. What you can do is my email address is listed in the chat, so it's just the muslimmetaphysician@gmail.com. So Sophia, please, or anybody else who wants to support me in another way other than by monthly membership, just please send me an email here, and I'm going to put it in the chat. So it's the muslimmetaphysician@gmail.com. Okay, so please just send me an email there, and we'll try to work something out. Now, but yes, appreciate the super chat there. Now, notice how, listen, I don't need to praise myself, but notice how I am quoting all these primary sources. And then I'm going to show you the secondary source layer where it's not just Jake Brancatella's or the Muslim metaphysician's interpretation of the text, right? It's going to be other Christians who are then doing what? Reading that same material and giving the same understanding of it as I do. So it's not just me. But notice that Dr. White can't appeal to anyone outside of himself. And he won't debate me on this. Watch. I can tell you he won't debate me on this because I will shred him in a cross-examination section with all these quotes. He won't be able to respond to them. He knows that his position cannot withstand debate in an actual formal debate. I will shred this to pieces. Now, why? Not because I agree with the church fathers about their position, because I'm going to show later on why I feel that it's problematic, but because I know that I have all of the sources on my side. He doesn't have a single source on his side. Now, I'm going to show here another quote from, what's his name here? Mr. White. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay. So, well, look what he says here. Here, let's look at this. But the fact is, it used of all three persons. Okay, one name shared by persons who communicate and make reference to one another. Yahweh is Ase, and each of the divine persons, therefore, is ontologically Ase, meaning with respect to their being and their existence, they're Ase. No, I just showed from Athanasius, from Hilary, that, and from all these church fathers that they're saying no, that the term begottenness refers ontologically. It's ontologically in the sense that you used it of existence and being. Now notice when he says here, but when we speak of their relationship to one another, we speak in a completely different category than ontology. No, you don't. We speak outside of time. We speak so as to be able to distinguish the persons. Hence, the use of such terminology in Gregory, not cause as in origin, but cause as in order and relationship. Notice what he said. Not cause as in origin. So cause doesn't mean origin, but cause is only order and relationship. Okay. Let's evaluate that, Mr. White. Let's evaluate this. Okay, he says it's not cause in terms of origin, but cause in terms of order and relationship. Let's see who's going to be correct. Dr. White, should I listen to Dr. White or St. Basil? Let's listen to what St. Basil has to say. That which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause. And then notice how he explains what cause means. For it would share the glory of the unoriginate because it is from the unoriginate. So wait a second. Does cause only refer to order and relationship? Or does it refer to origin? So notice how I not only have the quotes, but I'm directly refuting you, Dr. White, on all of your terminology and language. You use the word Aseity refers to ontology, which ontology you said refers to being and existence. I showed that both the terms being and existence, the church fathers used to say that the Father has his being in and of himself, whereas the Son and the Spirit have their being from the Father. They do not have their being in and of themselves. And then I showed you the term existence is used in Hilary to say that the Son, what? Again, the Son draws his existence through birth. He is not the source of his own being and the Son draws his existence through birth. Now I'm getting you on the term or origin. You made the claim that cause does not refer to origin. It only refers to order and relationship. But no. St. Basil to the rescue. He says that which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause, for it would share the glory of what? The unoriginate, because it is from the unoriginate. So the Son is not unoriginated. He has his origin and is originated from the Father. Clear as day. Cat's out of the bag. That's why your position and your statements could never stand up to me in a debate on this topic. I'll completely shred it to pieces. Completely shred it to pieces. Now, James White, I think this is done with the Twitter situation there. Now, what else? How else do we have to go? We've given him what? Let's do a recap. I've given primary sources. I've given St. Gregory of Nyssa. I've given St. Athanasius. I've given St. Hilary. I've given St. Basil. That's four Orthodox Nicene Fathers. Okay? How many more do you want? You want me to give more? You want more? Want me to give you more quotes? Let's see what else. I want to see if I missed anything. And I do apologize for being a bit disorganized. The whole thing with the mic earlier and the camera, and then when I finally get on, the internet has thrown me all out of whack, guys. So I do apologize that I'm not 100% organized here, because I had so many things opened, untabbed earlier to be able to show you guys on the screen. I really apologize about that. Okay. So now, Okay. So now we're going to move to John Calvin. Okay. Because now we want to go to the other primary source. So I've given what? Let's do a recap. As I said, I've given 4 church fathers. I've given St. Gregory of Nyssa. I've given St. Basil. I've given St. Athanasius. I've given Hilary. And I thought I did. Did I give Gregory Nazianzus? I don't think I did give Gregory of Nazianzus. But anyway, I could pull that up if I had time. Anyway, so I've given four early Nicene Orthodox Church Fathers and what they said. Then I compared that to what Dr. White said and showed that they're in direct contradiction with one another. The only way out of this is to say that I'm misquoting these church fathers. And I'll put that up against the test. I'm not misquoting them. Let's do it. I'm ready for it, baby. Now I'm going to go to what I mean by another primary source. I'm going to go to John Calvin himself, because Dr. White claims to be a Calvinist. And he did this whole section on Calvin where he pulled out the Institutes and he read all these quotes beforehand. What he doesn't realize is that everything he read and what he said doesn't establish or disprove my point. And notice that, as far as I can tell, he never actually directly read the quote that I gave from Calvin. I don't know why. People can draw their own conclusions. Maybe he is planning on doing a future video where he'll be able to do it. I really don't know. But, okay. So, let me give you. Okay, so here. John Calvin says this. Regarded as son, he is what? Of the Father. Now, notice the distinction that John Calvin makes. His essence is without beginning, while his person has its beginning in God the Father. And this is in chapter 8 of his famous work, The Institutes of the Christian Religion. And Calvin said that if you really want to know his position on things, don't go to his commentaries on the Bible. Don't go to his sermons. Go to his work, The Institutes of the Christian Religion. He said that this was his fundamental work for his theology. And Dr. White acknowledges and agrees with that. Now, again, John Calvin himself, and Dr. White claims to be a self-proclaimed Calvinist, regarded as son, meaning son is a person. Regarded as son, he is of the Father. He doesn't have existence in and of himself. His existence is from and of the Father. However, his essence or his nature is without beginning, while his person has its beginning in God the Father. And indeed, the Orthodox writers who in former times spoke of the Trinity use this term only with reference to the persons. So what does that tell you? That the Aseity is a personal property of the Father. It is not a personal property of the Son and the Holy Spirit. The Son as a person, and he kept saying, I'm conflating being in person. No. I'm not conflating being in person. I'm actually, if you listen to me quite specifically, the person of the Son is not self-existent. His existence is from the Father. Whereas this Father is unoriginate and his existence is in and of himself. Now, here we go to, so that's a primary source. That's a quote directly from Calvin. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start reading you secondary sources. Okay, so I'm going to read secondary sources that affirm that my reading of Calvin is correct, that my reading of the church fathers that I mentioned is correct. Now that's what I'm going to establish. So give me 1 second here while I pull this up. Okay. Looks like somebody just became a member. New member. MashaAllah. Appreciate it. So yeah, consider becoming a member. You'll get access to monthly members only live streams. And actually tomorrow we're going to have a members only live stream at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which will be 6:30 p.m. UK time. So if you want to be a part of that and you want to support me, click the join button and consider becoming a member. Now, here I'm going to deal with Calvin first because I just ended with Calvin. So I'm going to end with a secondary source of Calvin, and then I'm going to work back to secondary sources of the church fathers. So here's a quote from a book which is called Retrieving Eternal Generation. And it was published by Zondervan, which is a Christian publishing house. And one of the authors in there, because it's a compilation of different chapters with different authors, and they're generally Reformed theologians and writers in this text. This is from a modern person. In chapter 10 of the book of Retrieving Eternal Generation, published by Zondervan, he says this: Calvin allowed that the Father was the first principle. So now we have another word. He's the first principle. That what? And notice that he uses the word exists, because James White used the word existence. Aseity has to do with ontology, being and existence. Now listen to what this quote of referencing Calvin, and you'll see that the direct quote that I just read from Calvin is the direct quote that this author is referencing. And he's a Christian, Reformed Christian scholar. Says, Calvin allowed that the Father was the first principle, that, quote, the Son exists from the Father. Even that, and I quote, and he's quoting what I just read, the beginning of his person is God himself, referring to the Father. So that's a secondary source quoting referencing what I just made of Calvin. Then he says, nonetheless, he, meaning Calvin, insisted that the divine person of the Son was generated from the Father and that the Son's divine essence was not. So that's right. John Calvin made a distinction between the person and the nature or essence of the person that the Son had. Now, the essence didn't have a beginning, meaning that it's the essence, quote unquote, is self-existent. But the person of the Son is not self-existent. He is from the Father. The Son exists from the Father. The beginning of the person is God himself, referring to the Father. And that the Father alone is the first principle. The Father alone is the uncaused cause. The Son and the Spirit are not the first principles. The Father alone is the first principle. Okay? So this is not Muslim propaganda. That was a Christian, Reformed Christian scholar who took that position as well. Now, let me see if I can pull up on Twitter here, because Ryan Mullins joined in, and he actually commented on one of the posts that Dr. White made. So Dr. White, and how this started, it wasn't Jake who continued the sort of ensuing drama after the debate. It was Dr. White. He went to Twitter and made a tweet about this. And that's how it all kind of snowballed from there. So can you guys see this? No, okay, so this is the day after the debate, I believe. It was either the day after or the night of. Can't remember off the top of my head. But he says this: hey, Muslim metaphysician, could you provide the citation you gave from Calvin today, please? Thanks, which is the one that I referred to. Now watch. I replied very shortly after that. Book 1. Okay. I think I put chapter 13, but I think it was meant to be chapter 8. Maybe a typo, maybe an error. Here's the quote. Regarded as Son, he is of the Father. His essence is without beginning, while his person has its beginning in God the Father. I even sent a screenshot of it. We say that then the Godhead is absolutely of itself, and hence also we hold that the Son, regarded as God, meaning with reference to the divine nature, and without reference to the person, is of himself. Though we also say that regarded as Son, he is of the Father. Thus, his essence is without beginning, while his person has its beginning in God. And indeed, the Orthodox writers who in former times spoke of the Trinity use this term only with reference to the persons. Okay, so I gave a quote in writing. I gave a screenshot with the highlighted section. I told them exactly where it was in the text. Okay, and then and notice what he and then I gave the quote of the secondary source that I just read from Retrieving Eternal Generation. Now look what his comment was. His question was, instead of addressing it, Jake, an honest and simple question. Have you read the Institutes? Yes. Now, yes, I have. Were you aware of this quote in Calvin's position? Calvin's position is pretty much standard Nicene orthodoxy, i.e., the person of the Son is not Aseity. Although the church fathers generally argue that Aseity is not a Aseity is a property of the Father, not of the divine nature. And then he goes on and on to talk about other stuff. Okay, so what I want to do here is address another part of this thread. So now just bear with me while I try to find this thread here. Okay, so would it be in here? No, it's not in there. So maybe it's in here. So then I quoted from Dr. Mullins' paper on this. And then he replied and said, I do not see how anyone can read Calvin and actually think he was saying the Son was caused to exist as a person. See, imagine this. He's so perplexed how anybody could think that the Son was caused to exist by as a person, even though I gave all the quotes from the church fathers saying that. Unbelievable. Now, then this is when I tagged Ryan in on this and said, Ryan, because one of the secondary sources I quoted from was from Mullins. So, which was here. Where he says no being that is caused to exist can share an aseity. The Calvinist is right to point out that we must distinguish the divine persons from the divine essence, but that does not help with this problem. In order for a person to be divine, that person must have all of the necessary and sufficient divine attributes. One of the attributes is aseity. If a person is caused to exist, that person cannot possibly have the attribute of aseity, even if this person is eternal. So notice he says, does this Calvinist move rebut the Eunomian objection? No, it is incoherent. Okay, so even if this person is eternally caused to exist, such that the person never came into being, the person is still not ase, since that person is not self-existent. Further, such a person cannot have the attribute of self-sufficiency. A person cannot be self-sufficient if her essence is dependent upon something else. The Son's ability to share in the divine essence is dependent upon the Father's generative activity. So the Son is not self-sufficient. Okay, so I quoted that from Mullins. James White responded, not addressing the issue, just saying, I can't see how anyone can read Calvin this way. So then Mullins comes in at a certain point. Now, let me see if I can find where Ryan comes in and answers to this. Let's see. Just give me a second. Okay. So I said, it seems pretty clear to me. He says, only if you want to think he is saying something consonant with your objections. But anyone reading the entire chapter, knowing Calvin and understanding his emphasis upon autotheos, knows you have badly missed his point. So then I said, has Ryan Mullins also misunderstood Calvin and the early church fathers in the screenshots from his paper above? What does Mullins say, who is a Christian theologian and philosopher? I think that Jake has accurately represented what Calvin and other Calvin scholars explicitly say. And then he responds, James White goes on this long thing here. Let me see if I can find Mullins' other quote. Okay. Where? See if I can find it, because there was another quote from Mullins where he kind of took a dig at Dr. White on this point. So let me see if I'm able to find it. Not there. Not there. Not there. Oh. Trying to find exactly where Mullins made that comment, because that was... Oh. See, this is why I hate Twitter. It's so fun. It's so hard to find things. It's so annoying. Make it so difficult to find anything. I don't understand why. Okay, here it is. Here it is. Here we go. Okay, so I said, Ryan, did okay. Seems clear to me. Ryan, did Calvin think the Father caused the person, notice the person of the Son to exist, right? Also, is the Orthodox Nicene notion of eternal generation the idea that the Father eternally causes the persons of the Son and the Spirit to exist? Let's wait to see what Ryan Mullins has to say. Now, he responds here. Dr. White, in my published article that Jake gave a screenshot of, I am citing the Reformed theologian, Professor John Webster. Perhaps Webster doesn't know how to read Calvin either. So he was kind of giving a dig at James White there, saying, "Look, dude, you're gaslighting us." Well, Jake doesn't know how to read Calvin. I don't know how to read Calvin. Even maybe the Reformed theologian John Webster doesn't know how to read Calvin. So he says, look, again, no, the claim is not that the Son begins to exist. The claim is that the Father is the cause, source, or fount of the Son's existence. That is what Nicaea teaches. If one says that Calvin denies this, then one is saying that Calvin denies Nicaea. Look how big of that issue is. So here's what I'm showing. And Ryan Mullins is perfectly right. Well, look, if you want to say that Calvin denies that the Father causes the person of the Son to exist, that he's the cause, source, and fount of the Son's existence, if you want to say that Calvin denied that and that's not what he meant in that quote, then Calvin denies Nicaea. Now, why is Mullins saying that would result in Calvin denying Nicaea? Because what Nicaea says, eternally begotten, and the fact that the church fathers who penned the creed and the post-Nicenes, in the way that they understood it, was exactly what I demonstrated for the past hour. From what? Gregory of Nyssa, St. Athanasius, St. Basil, Hilary, St. Gregory of Nazianzus. All of these church fathers unanimously agreed with this position. So if Calvin doesn't mean that and he denies that, then he denies Nicaea. And the same thing for you too, James White. I think that you are not a Nicene. You actually deny the Council of Nicaea because you don't actually believe that the Father caused the person of the Son to exist. You reject terms of ontology. You reject terms of being and existence being applied to the Son and those things being caused. You reject that where all the fathers and the Nicenes said that that's exactly what it was. So I think that Dr. White actually rejects the Nicene Creed. Dr. White rejects the Nicene Creed because he rejects the idea of eternally begotten. He does not believe that the Son and the Spirit are begotten and spirated of the Father in a causal notion. He denies the causal notion. Okay, so that was more. Now remember, I'm backtracking. So that was partly from James White, and then my interaction with him on this issue and what Ryan Mullins said. Now, Ryan Mullins said that not only did I accurately represent Calvin, that I'm accurately representing the early church fathers. So that's a scholarly source right there on Twitter backing me up. Now, nobody's backing up James other than himself. He can't appeal to anyone outside of himself. He's made himself almost, the arbiter of truth on this matter. Now, let me go here further and provide some. We're done with Calvin for the moment being. Now, what I'm going to do here is now, because I dealt with primary sources of the church fathers, primary source of Calvin, secondary sources of Calvin. Now I'm going to go to secondary sources of the church fathers that quote on exactly what I said. So remember all those quotes I read from the church fathers, the being, existence, cause, originated, all those things. Let's say if modern church historians agree. So this is what Stephen R. Holmes says in his book, The Quest for the Trinity, and he's a Christian scholar and historian. He says, and I quote, within the divine life. I'm sorry. Let me back it up a step. He says, what all sides agree upon during the patristic era is this, and I quote, within the divine life, the Father is the sole cause, begetting the Son, inspiring the Spirit. Listen again. And in Islamic terminology, now I have a secondary source who not only is representing what I'm saying, he's claiming ijma. He's claiming ijma, meaning he's claiming not only that I'm accurately representing the Nicene fathers who commented on this, he's quoting consensus on the scholars. Not only is he quoting that the patristic era were in a consensus on this issue, he's saying that there's a consensus on the consensus, meaning that the secondary sources have a consensus that this is what the consensus of the early church fathers believed. How much more clearer can we get? I'm sorry. It just doesn't get any clearer than this. What all sides agree upon during the patristic era is that within the divine life, the Father is the sole cause, begetting the Son, inspiring the Spirit. The Father is the sole cause that is uncaused. Ijma. So now I have not only somebody backing me up, a secondary source claiming ijma of the actual church fathers. I guess he's wrong too. He doesn't know how to read the church fathers. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Now, what else do we have here? So that's one secondary source. Now, let me go to some others. Let's go to my good friend, Dr. William Lane Craig, who is another Christian scholar, and he has an entire paper written about this, which you guys are free to read. Okay? So, let me see if I can find it here. Let me see if I'm able to. Okay, so Dr. Craig says this. First, he says that he doesn't think that the doctrine of the begetting of the Son from the Father in his divine as opposed to human nature, he says it's not biblically attested. So one of his first criticisms is that it's not biblically attested. Second, he says, it also seems to introduce an inevitable element of subordinationism into the Godhead, which would seem to make the Son inferior to the Father, because only the Father is unbegotten, who exists in a self-existent way, and the Son has the ground of his being in the Father, and therefore has a kind of derivative existence, which to me, at least, seems to make the Son arguably inferior to the Father. Okay? So, again, William Lane Craig is saying William Lane Craig rejects this part of the Nicene Creed. Why? Because he says it results in subordinationism and inequality amongst persons. So he's one of the modern day Protestants, evangelicals, that actually denies the doctrine of eternal generation. First, he doesn't think it's biblical. Second, he thinks it's theologically problematic. And third, he also thinks it's philosophically problematic. Brother Hashim Katan, my favorite YouTube channel. May Allah bless you, bro. Hope this helps, inshallah. Ameen. Alhamdulillah. Really, really do appreciate that, Brother Hashim. Wow. Really, really appreciate that. May Allah bless you. Brother Isa, Salam, Brother Jake, could you please invite Mr. Shanus32 to discuss panentheism? Keep up the good work. Yeah, maybe at some point, obviously not on this stream because it's on a totally different topic. So, but yeah, maybe at some point. Let me just see if I can scroll up and see if I missed any. I don't think I missed anything else, but yes, may Allah reward you guys and bless you for supporting me. Really appreciate that. Now, back to the issue here. Okay. Dr. Craig is one of those modern day Protestants who deny eternal generation because they think he finds it problematic. Now, we're going to go into the argument of why I agree with Dr. Craig that it is problematic. But notice what Dr. Craig does here. Dr. Craig, who denies eternal generation and that portion of the Nicene Creed, and Ryan Mullins, who denies it and that portion of the Nicene Creed, those who deny the eternal processions and that part of the Nicene Creed, notice what they don't do. They don't do what Dr. James White is doing. Now, let me explain. We can narrow this discussion into three positions, okay? First position is that the notion of eternally begotten was a causal notion, and that exactly what I'm saying is the correct representation of the Nicene Creed and the post-Nicene Fathers. That is the overwhelming majority of the position amongst Catholics, Orthodox, and even Protestants. And they say, Jake, yes, what you're saying is correct, and we agree with you, but we don't think that it's problematic. That's the first group that's overwhelming majority. Second group is the group of people like Ryan Mullins, William Lane Craig, and some modern day Protestant evangelicals who have only denied this doctrine over the past 50, 100 years or so. Very, very, very recently. So the second group is those who deny the doctrine. Those same people who deny the doctrine, they say, yes, Jake and that other Orthodox group, you guys are correct that that's what the early church fathers, Nicene church fathers believed, and that's what the Nicene Creed meant to those people. And because that's what they meant and that's what they believed, we deny it because we think it's problematic. So there's not an issue over interpretation. Both parties, those who accept it and those who reject it, both agree on the meaning, and one say, yes, we agree on the meaning and it's correct. The other one says, we agree on the meaning and it's incorrect. Now we have a third position of people like Dr. White who come along, and I'm sorry to say, but it's largely due to ignorance. There are people, and in this case, Dr. White is pretty much by himself. Hardly any people are going to agree with him on this, of saying, no, 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 no. Both of you other two groups are wrong. The Orthodox group and the William Lane Craig group, you're both wrong. I believe in eternal generation, and I believe in the Nicene Creed, and I believe what the early post-Nicene church fathers believe. But guess what? I believe in all of that, but you're both wrong. They didn't mean what you are saying they meant. They meant something different. And then he goes into this understanding of, well, aseity means ontology, and ontology means being and existence, but none of them actually believed that the Son's existence was not self-existent, that his existence was from the Father. So it's a matter of historical reinterpretation, and I'm sorry, basically mutilating the entire early church history. Totally wrong about this. Now, so Dr. White is in a third class of his own. Third class of his own. Now, here's how we know that another example of how we know that this is the Orthodox position. Even the Arians who denied that the Son and the Spirit were homoousios with the Father. Do you know why they denied that they were homoousios with the Father, or of the same nature? The reason they denied it was because of this doctrine, because of this doctrine of eternal generation. They said that the Father, fundamentally, his essence is to be uncaused. And because the Son and Spirit are caused or originated, even if it's not temporally, they cannot possibly possess the same nature or essence as the Father. The church father said, no, 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 no. You're right. Only the Father is the first principle and the uncaused person, whereas the Son and the Spirit are caused. But you have it wrong. Aseity is not a property of the nature. And because it's not a property of the nature and they share in terms of every other property, the persons of the Trinity possess the same nature. But aseity is a personal property of the Father, and that's how we say that they're the same nature. So this shows that they were couching aseity not in terms of nature, but in terms of the personal property of the Father alone. And that was the dispute between the Arians. Now, people, modern day Protestants like Craig and Mullins are saying, we agree with the Arians. If you guys want to say that the Father alone is ase and has aseity and the Son and Spirit don't, then they can't have the same essence and they can't be God in the same way as the Father. And so what they say is, because we want to say that the Son and the Spirit are God and ase in the same way that the Father is, we have to deny the Nicene Creed and the Doctrine. So this is how it goes. These are where the lines in the sand are drawn. Now, this is what William Lane Craig quotes Hilary, that the Father therefore is greater because he is Father, but the Son, because he is Son, is not less. He says this: the Father is greater than the Son, but the Son is not less than the Father. That's just to talk logical nonsense. That's like saying 6 is greater than 3, but 3 is not less than 6. That just doesn't make any logical sense. So William Lane Craig is quoting Hilary and then saying this doesn't make any sense, guys. Again, he quotes Basil, which I mentioned earlier, and he says about when St. Basil says, so what the evident solution is that the greater refers to origination while the equal begins to the nature. He says, so what Basil is saying is that the Father is greater in terms of origination because he is unbegotten, whereas the Son is begotten, but in terms of nature, they both share the same nature and therefore are equal. This reply seems to raise all kinds of difficult questions. Doesn't it belong to the nature of the Father as an individual person to be unbegotten? And doesn't it belong to the nature of the Son as an individual person to be begotten? Or is there a possible world in which the Father is begotten and not unbegotten? Classical Trinitarian theology would deny this. So, how are the Father and the Son equal in nature if greatness refers to origination and the manner of their origination is essential to their individual natures? If you think about it, suppose that they are equal in nature, but that the Father has the contingent property of being unbegotten and the Son has the contingent property of being begotten. In that case, they have the same nature, but the Father still has this contingent property of being unbegotten, a property the Son lacks. Wouldn't that make him greater than the Son, at least in this respect? It would seem to me that it would. And then he says this: so at the end of the day, what Basil has to say is that having self-existence is not, after all, a perfection or great-making property. He says, and I quote, that which is from a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause, for it would share the glory of the unoriginate because it is from the unoriginate. That seems to me, meaning Craig, to be not a convincing answer. To be dependent upon the unoriginated being for one's existence is to lack a ground of being, a being in and of oneself alone. And that surely is not as great as to be self-existent, which is able to exist all on one's own. It has the ground of its existence in and of itself. This kind of derivative being is the same way in which creatures exist. Creatures exist in virtue of being caused by another. So despite protestations to the contrary, now listen to what he says here. Now I'm showing you how this is related to Nicene orthodoxy. So despite the protestations to the contrary, it does seem to me that Nicene orthodoxy has not completely shed the sort of subordinationism that was introduced into the doctrine of the Trinity by the early Greek apologists with their logos doctrine. So it's very clear. Very clear. Now notice what he says here when he starts quoting other church fathers. He says, even if the eternal procession takes place necessarily and apart from the Father's will, the Son is less than the Father because the Father alone exists a se, that is to say, through himself or of himself. He has aseity. The Father exists a se while the Son exists through another and not a se. So I think that that's very clear, guys. I think that that's very clear. So what I did here was I've given direct primary source quotes from at least 4 church fathers: St. Athanasius, St. Gregory, St. Basil, St. Hilary. Then I gave a direct primary source quote from John Calvin. Then I gave secondary source quote from 3 people about John Calvin, which was Ryan Mullins, John Webster indirectly through Ryan Mullins, and through chapter 10 of that book of Retrieving Eternal Generation, which was published by Zondervan. Then I went to secondary source material that comments on the Nicene Creed and what the church fathers believed about it. I gave one primary source material, which was Stephen R. Holmes, The Quest for the Trinity, which he quoted ijma amongst the early church Nicenes on this issue. Not only did I have a secondary source on that, but he quoted ijma. He quoted consensus of the early church fathers on this. Then I quoted William Lane Craig going through all of that, and I also referenced Ryan Mullins as well. So another 3 secondary sources. I can give many, many more, but I just don't want to belabor the point. I think that's sufficient for now. Now what I want to do is I want to lay out the basic argument. The basic argument is this, of my position against the Nicene Creed and the Son being eternally begotten, and the same thing that Ryan Mullins and Dr. Craig would say. And this was my third argument in my opening statement against Dr. James White. Why don't I read what my third argument was? Let me read what my third argument was. So here, I said this. My third argument is that what we can know about God from general revelation in nature is contrary to not Trinitarian Nicene orthodoxy. Through natural revelation and contingency arguments, we conclude that a God exists whose existence is necessary, self-sufficient, and a se. However, the Nicene Creed, which Dr. White affirms, states that, and I quote, I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only Son of God, the only begotten Son of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of one essence with the Father, close quote. The notion of the Son being eternally begotten from the Father results in the Son lacking aseity, which is an essential property of what it means to be God, such that without it, one cannot be God. Aseity, or to be a se, is the property of self-existence, or to have existence in and of oneself, as opposed to through or from another. It is the property of being uncaused instead of being caused by another. The church fathers that were responsible for the Nicene Creed held that the Son being begotten of the Father was a causal notion. According to the Christian scholar Stephen R. Holmes, what all sides agree upon during the patristic era is that, and I quote, within a divine life, the Father is the sole cause, begetting the Son and spirating the Spirit. The great church father, St. Gregory of Nyssa, in his work On Three Gods, states that, and I quote, The principle of causality distinguishes then the persons of the Holy Trinity. It affirms that the one, meaning the Father, is uncaused, while the other depends on the cause, meaning the Son and the Spirit. St. Athanasius himself says, and I quote, "The Son has his being not of himself, but of the Father," which is found on the opinion of Dionysius 15. Then again, since Dr. White is a self-proclaimed Calvinist, let's see what John Calvin himself states in his famous work, The Institutes. Quote, "Regarded as Son, he is of the Father. His essence is without beginning, while his person has its beginning in God the Father. And indeed, the Orthodox writers who in former times spoke of the Trinity use this term only with reference to the persons," which is found in chapter 8 of his famous work, The Institutes of the Christian Religion. Finally, all of these quotes demonstrate that Nicene orthodoxy affirms that the Son does not possess the attribute of aseity because his existence is from the Father. He does not have self-existence. In fact, the church fathers thought that for the three persons all to be ase and uncaused would be polytheism. So, Dr. White has two options, and these are still the same two options for Dr. White. Either affirm the Nicene Creed and admit that the Son is not ase and therefore not God, or reject the Nicene Creed and deal with the historical problem that results from rejecting the early consensus of the Trinitarian Church Fathers. That was my argument in the debate. So to summarize, my argument is this. Aseity, which is self-existence or to be uncaused, is an essential and necessary attribute in order to be God. Premise 2, the Son and the Spirit do not possess, by Trinitarian Nicene orthodoxy, the property of aseity. Therefore, the Son and the Spirit cannot be God because they lack a necessary attribute in order to be considered God. That's my argument against the Nicene Creed. Now, Dr. White seems like he doesn't hold a Trinitarian Nicene orthodoxy because he doesn't actually believe that this was a causal ontological notion, even after I've demonstrated with primary source material and secondary source material. So I challenged Dr. White on two grounds. I challenged Dr. White to a formal debate on this topic. First, the debate will be surrounded on what the Nicene Creed said, what the early post-Nicene Church Fathers believed, and what they believed the Nicene Creed was, what John Calvin believed about it as well. Did he believe the same thing or similarly to them, or did he believe something different than the Nicene Creed? And thirdly, whether or not this position, if it is orthodox and correct, whether or not it's biblical and whether or not it's actually problematic theologically. I challenge a debate to Dr. White on this Nicene Creed position and eternally begotten. Let's see if he'll accept it. I'm almost sure that he won't accept it because everything I've just done in the past hour and a half will completely shred his position. Now, one other thing I want to get to here. I'm glad that we've been able to sort of get this stream going again because it wasn't working out well early on. So what I've done is I've evaluated the Nicene Creed and the doctrine of the eternal generation of the Son. I read the creed, looked at what it meant in its original context. I looked at what the early Nicene Church Fathers wrote about it, and now I explained why it matters by giving an argument against it. And I've also looked at Dr. White's things and the sort of the back and forth on Twitter. And now the one last thing that I want to go to is a video from Dr. White. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick, where he was addressing or attempting to address, although I think it was a pretty poor addressing. He was attempting to address my quote of Gregory of Nyssa. So let me see if I can get to that real quick. 1 second here. Okay, so let me just share my screen here. And this is going to be the last point, guys. But this is something you guys should watch, because you'll see now Dr. White's attempt. This video is only 11 minutes, 12 minutes long. Let's put it on 1.5. The video is called Gregory of Nyssa's on Not Three Gods. And it was from a larger episode of The Dividing Line. He has another channel called Dividing Line Highlights, where he posts highlights from his show. And this was a clipped section from one of his recent shows. It was put on there 2 days ago on August 6th. So what he's going to respond to in this quote is my quote of Gregory of Nyssa, when Gregory of Nyssa says, "And not three gods, the principle of causality distinguishes then the persons of the Holy Trinity. It affirms that the one is uncaused, meaning the Father, while the other depends on the cause." Now, let's watch this video and see if he actually adequately addresses the quote and the argument. Bismillah.
Last paragraph in the Schaff set, the English translation, reads as follows. Thus, since on the one hand, the idea of cause differentiates the persons of the Holy Trinity, declaring that one exists without a cause and another is of the cause. And since on the one hand, now I'll stop saying, I would just stylistically, and looking at the Greek, it uses mende. So I don't know why the translation went this way. It makes more sense to say, and since on the other hand, the divine nature is apprehended by every conception as unchangeable and undivided. For these reasons, we properly declare the Godhead to be one and God to be one, and employ in the singular all other names which express divine attributes. So he says earlier on that the question as it was presented, and he recognizes that it could be an objection, and certainly as Muslims use it, it's an objection, that the whole idea, and this is really what the logical problem of the Trinity thing is all about, is, of course, to try to say this is logically incoherent based upon applying the same standards to the relationship of the persons as you have ontologically to the existence of the divine being. It's no matter how hard you fight, you are conflating categories. And that comes up here in his very concluding statement, having argued for the deity of Christ, having argued that...
He says we're conflating categories. So now he's going on to the tritheism objection based on St. Gregory's paper on this, on Not Three Gods. Again, Dr. White has a habit of going on tangents that are not directly relevant to the point. And we'll see that he actually never in a head-on way actually addresses the quote and shows that although St. Gregory said this, he still believes that the Son and the Spirit are ase and self-existent. He never actually shows that.
You cannot, there's a section in here, don't have time to read the whole thing. Like I said, it's available online. I would recommend it to you if you are really interested in these kinds of things to read through it. But he had argued that the Father does not do anything separately from the Son doesn't do anything that is not perfected by the Spirit. So within what we would call the economic Trinity, there is this consistency that flows from the unity that is theirs in the full possession of the divine nature, and yet they're not doing the same thing. And so the illustration to use is if we say that we have been given life by God, the scriptures tell us that this life comes from the decree of the Father. The Son gives life to whom he wills. The Spirit's the one that makes us alive. But he says we don't say that we've received three lives. We've received one life, and we recognize that one life comes from God. And when I'm speaking of the life that I've received from the Son, that's not some different kind of life than what would come from the Father or from the Spirit. I recognize the life I received from the Son is in perfect harmony with the decree of the Father, and it's been brought to me by the Spirit of God. There's perfect harmony here. This is his argument. And as part of his argument as to why he concludes you don't use the phraseology three gods because it's inappropriate to do so. But the point is that even in this final, well, you could identify it as a single sentence. Suppose if this was the living translation of Greek, it would probably be about 6 sentences. But still, let me read again and listen to how Gregory, and you can't force anybody to do this. Okay, critics can ignore these distinctions and ignore the difference between relationship and ontology, and there you go. But I'm talking to Christians here.
He said that critics can ignore the relationship, the distinction between relationship and ontology. Now, note that I showed you guys before, and I got to pull this up again. Let me just pull it up again to really drive the point home. Let's do this. Let's do this where James White actually makes a distinction for us. So he tells us the distinction between he says there's a distinction between relationship and ontology, and that he tells us what ontology refers to. So let's show that real quick. Look here. Aseity refers to ontology. Ontology refers to being, existence. So let's see who's conflating categories. Is it Jake, or is it St. Basil, or is it St. Athanasius or St. Hilary? Which one is it? So he said that I'm conflating categories of being and relationship when it comes to eternal generation. But let's see this. Athanasius says what? One second here. Let me just get the quote here in my notes. So, oh, I got it over here. Sorry, wrong paper. So Athanasius says, the Son has his being, not of himself, but of the Father. Who's conflating? Am I conflating being, or is it saying Athanasius? Sorry, not going to work, Mr. White. Your gaslighting tactics aren't going to work because I've got everything in front of me. You're not going to try to pull this over on the audience. I'm sorry. Not going to happen. So we see St. Athanasius, unless you want to say that he's conflating categories, because he uses the word being. Again, Hilary, the Father is greater than the Son, for manifestly he is greater who makes another to be all that he himself is, who imparts to the Son by the mystery of the birth, the image of his own unbegotten nature, who begets him from himself into his own form. Then again, he says this. Okay, where was that? Let me see here. One second here. Okay, here, I got it here. Yep. Athanasius again says the Son has his beginning not of himself, but of the Father. His being, not of himself. I'm not conflating being with relationship. St. Athanasius is. Again, Hilary, he is not the source of his own being. What? He is not the source of his own being. So who's conflating ontology with relationship? No, I'm using your definition. Ontology is being and existence. And the church fathers use it in reference to this. To ontology, being and existence, causal relationship, not just mere relationship of the way that you're thinking of it. Again, he is not the source of his own being. It is from the Father's abiding nature that the Son what? Draws his existence through birth. Existence, being. Got them both down. You said ontology is existence, being. And the church fathers used the eternal processions in this way. I'm not conflating them. I'm going off what the church fathers are doing instead of making up my own doctrine and rejecting the Nicene Creed like Dr. White is doing. Again, we'll see in St. Basil. That which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause. Again, causal relation, causal terminology using. And then what is the cause? For it would seem to share the glory of the unoriginate because it is from the unoriginate. So again, the word originate, which you didn't like, which we have down here, right? And you say, but the fact is, It is used of all three persons, one name shared by persons who communicate and make reference to one another. Yahweh is Ase, and each of the divine persons is therefore ontologically Ase. But when we speak of their relationship to one another, we speak in a completely different category than ontology. We speak outside of time, and we speak so as to be able to distinguish the persons. Hence, the use of such terminology in Gregory as cause, as in or is not cause as in origin, but cause as in order and relationship. So St. Basil, let's see what he says. Does he mean it in terms of just merely order or relationship, or is it in terms of origin? What did he say? It would share the glory of the unoriginate because it is from the unoriginate. So it's originated. So he is talking about terms of cause in terms of origination. So again, we got you on your three terms. Origin, you denied origin. You denied the term being. You denied the term existence. You denied that all three of these were related or relevant to the Nicene Creed and eternal processions. I debunked that. I showed you being in Athanasius and Hilary. I showed you existence in Hilary. I showed you origin in St. Basil. Clear refutation. Clear. And Dr. White never actually winds up addressing the issue. So I think that somebody sent something. Oh, Brother Mahdi just became a YouTube member. So yeah, consider becoming a member. There's a pinned message in the chat. You can click either the join message or click the direct link in there, and you will have access to members only live streams monthly, and it helps support my work, which tomorrow I will be doing a stream. Like I said, I'll be doing that tomorrow. So may Allah reward you, and I really do appreciate that. Alternatively, you can go to Patreon and do the same thing, and you will have the same access to the members only live streams. Let me just put the link in the. I'm going to put that as a link, as a pinned message now, because the other one was pinned for quite some time. So you should have been able to see that already. Just give me 1 second here that I put this as a pinned message. Okay. So the new pinned message is for Patreon. So if you rather do it on Patreon, that's fine as well. And let me see here. 1 second. Yeah, so what happened to that comment that I just saw? I don't know where that comment just went. I thought I saw a super chat, but that's not there. Anyway, I don't see it there. Maybe I'm seeing things. So anyway, let me get back to it. So let's continue to listen to Dr. White. Let me share my screen here. Put Mr. White back on the board. Let's see if he ever actually addresses the quote head on and tells us what it means.
For our understanding and our benefit and our edification. Since on the one hand, I'm going to go ahead and do the mende. Mende is a construction in Greek language that comes across into English as one hand on the other hand. Okay. And this is it's a somewhat complex sentence because you've got some article thrown in an infinitive, but anyways, I'm just going to translate that way. Thus, since on the one hand, the idea of cause differentiates the persons of the Holy Trinity, declaring that one exists without a cause and another is of the cause. Now, I didn't have time to go back because I know it's in Twitter someplace, and Jake used a particular quotation that is different in its phraseology, but I couldn't find it quickly as to what it was. The point being that the first aspect of one hand, other hand, is differentiation of the persons, not origination, not creation, but differentiation of the persons, declaring that one exists without a cause and another is of the cause.
Notice what he just said.
I think
Listen to what he just said.
And I think it was the same thing with, didn't have time to go back and, because I know it's in Twitter someplace, and Jake used a particular quotation that is different in its phraseology, but I couldn't find it as to what it was. The point being that the first aspect of one hand, other hand, is differentiation of the persons, not origination, not creation, but
notice what he says. It's a differentiation of the persons, not of origination.
Aspect of one hand, other hand, is differentiation of the persons, not origination.
Not origination. Not origination. Okay, what does St. Basil said? That which is from such a cause is not inferior to that which has no cause, for it would share the glory of the unoriginate, meaning the Father, because it is from the unoriginate. So it is originated. But again, they had a notion of eternal origination and eternal causation. They didn't believe that it was temporal, but they still used the terminology of causation, origination, and which led to the fact that only the Father had existence in and of himself, whereas the Son and the Spirit don't. So you don't like the word origination, but that's what the church fathers believed. That's why you are not down with the Nicene Creed here, Dr. White. I'm sorry, you're not.
Not creation?
That's right. It wasn't creation. Never said that. Never said there was time or creation involved. Don't straw man me.
But differentiation of the persons, declaring that one exists without a cause and another is of the cause. Now, I think the idea, and I think it was the same thing with the Calvin quote, the idea is to introduce an implicit subordinationism, which makes sense from an Islamic perspective. It's not what the Quran did, but that we discussed that briefly as well. I continue to think that is a fatal objection. I really do.
He continues to think that the objection against the Quran it's a fatal objection that the Quran supposedly misrepresents the Trinity, or that it doesn't mention this subordinationism, even though I completely debunked that on my previous stream. So maybe you should watch that too, Dr. White, and stop using these low-level apologetic arguments, because unlike you, I actually read the church fathers. I actually have quotes from them. I actually have arguments based on the quotes. I actually have secondary source material that's based on those same quotes that supports my argument. Who are you quoting? You're not quoting any Islamic scholars. You're not reading Islamic scholarship. You're not reading the tradition, the Islamic tradition, and then making arguments based on that. You're not reading the tafsirs of those ayat, even though Imam Qurtubi said exactly what I said in that previous video on what was understood about the Trinity. And even the Prophet alayhi salam, when it was brought to him about chapter 931, which I brought up, which was relevant because the Messiah being God was mentioned there, or making him a Lord, what was mentioned about the monks and the rabbis as well is that they have taken them as a God because they're accepting them to decide what is haram and halal outside of the revelation itself. That's why what the Prophet alayhi salam said in the hadith was exactly my interpretation, that you have given divine prerogative to humans that don't deserve it. Allah alone has those divine attributes and prerogative to declare what is haram and halal. Same thing, if we can have even that understanding, and they could be charged with serving lords besides Allah or worshiping them. Well, guess what? There's no problem then with saying that about Mary or the Son. But again, you don't read, doesn't seem like you read classical Islamic scholarship, and you don't read the tafsirs on those verses from people like Imam Qurtubi, or the hadith that explicitly gives a tafsir of the ayah, We have the prophet himself gives a tafsir of the ayah, which supports exactly my interpretation of what I said of the verses and why it mentions Mary as being supposedly worshipped. And then chapter 45, verse 23. So anyway, people go watch that video if you haven't already and share it with James White and the rest of these silly Christians that make this kind of silly argument of saying that the Quran misrepresents the Trinity. It's a ridiculous argument.
But I don't think just laughing it off is enough. And
yeah, I didn't just laugh it off. I completely refuted it, and now I'm laughing it off. Yeah, it is a joke.
I don't think that. I'm sorry. I just have not seen. Actually, I almost never see Islamic exegesis of the Quran the way you see Christian exegesis of Scripture.
I almost never see Islamic scholarship provide exegesis of the Quran in the same way that I do of Christian scholarship and Christian exegesis of the Bible. Are you kidding me? Well, guess what? Probably why you've never seen it is probably because you don't read traditional Islamic scholarship and their tafsirs. You probably don't read them. You probably never even heard of Imam Zamakhshari. And watch what we're going to show in his next comment. This is going to expose this.
I've read major portions of tafsir literature, and I've just always been amazed at the substantive difference in the Christian desire to and ability to engage in grammatical, historical exegesis of the text. You just don't get that. And in fact, there's resistance to it amongst Muslims. There are some people call it historic.
Grammatic and linguistic. Listen to him. You do not find amongst Muslim exegetes grammatical and linguistic exegesis of the Quran. Well, we have an entire specific type of tafsir that is based on that is based on linguistic and historical analysis. What are you talking about? Imam Zamakhshari, which I guess you haven't read from Imam Zamakhshari, is known for this, precisely for having a linguistic and exegetical interpretation of the Quran. Now, people can disagree with it. Fine, whatever you want, because, for those who know, he had a certain affiliation. But the fact of the matter is you cannot deny Imam Zamakhshari's attempt to give a linguistic and exegetical interpretation of the Quran that is based on the Arabic language. Are you kidding me? And for you to make that comment shows you don't even know about Imam Zamakhshari's tafsir. I'm sorry. So this kind of like Western supremacy ideology is not going to work because we have that. You just haven't read it, unfortunately. And it seems that you haven't read enough of your own church history to really know what eternal generation is even about. And again, he's going on a tangent that isn't even directly addressing the specific issue that I'm raising.
And if you do that, you just destroy faith in the Quran. It's fascinating. Well worth expanding on some of that stuff. Anyway,
when you do that,
the idea is
when you do that, you destroy faith in the Quran. I guess Imam Zamakhshari he destroyed faith in the Quran and Islam, even though his entire tafsir is primarily based on the linguistics and exegetical and the Arabic language. Unbelievable.
Well, Gregory is talking about.
Actually, on the opposite, I've never seen. It's quite the opposite to me, and it could be due to my ignorance. I've never seen a preservation of a language as the Muslims have done with Arabic in a work such as the tafsir of Imam Zamakhshari in the same way that you have it with your Greek text and your Bible and your Hebrew. Probably because you don't even have the original text, so it would be difficult to do anyway. I've never seen that. Are you kidding me?
The Father is not caused, but the Son is caused. And so I'd want to look very carefully at exactly what what entails means, what presbuon means, and exactly how it's being utilized and what's being asserted there. But in light of what Gregory...
So he wants to look at exactly how cause is being used. He says he wants to look at it. Guess what? He never tells you what it actually means. Because he can't. Because he rejects causal notion. Even though that's what the early church believed. He rejects the Nicene Creed.
He says in the rest of the epistle. This is a distinction of relationship. It's a logical.
He thinks it's a logical distinction and merely a distinction of relationship. No, it's not.
Distinction. It is never a temporal distinction. And
it's not temporal, but see, here's the problem. He keeps associating cause with temporality. They denied that. They believed it was eternal causation.
Yet, this is the great challenge of Christian theology in discussing the nature of God, is our language is fundamentally temporal. Every verb we use, even when we try to be atemporal in the utilization of like an infinitive or something, it's still in a context. You can't avoid it. And so I don't want to look at those things. But the balance in Gregory is found in the day portion. And since on the other hand, the divine nature, the theia, the hetheia phusis, the divine nature is apprehended by every conception as unchangeable and undivided. Unchangeable and undivided. And Gregory is affirming that the Son possesses this divine nature, this ontological reality, that he's eternally existed as God and in possession of that divine nature.
Of course, he affirms that the Son and the Spirit have the same nature and they're all eternal. We all agree on that. That's irrelevant. That does nothing to address the issue of whether or not the Father is the only uncaused person and the Son and the Spirit are caused and what that means. And the being is not in and of themselves.
For these reasons, he then says, we properly declare the Godhead to be one and God to be one and employ in the singular all the other names which express divine attributes. But it's that on the one hand, on the other hand. And so he recognizes where the objection's coming from, but what he's saying is, in the final analysis, when you do not conflate the categories, then the result would be...
I'm not conflating the categories. You're ignoring the categories.
We do not utilize the phraseology of three gods because there is only one being of God. And that the relationship of Father, Son, and Spirit is not something that changes the indivisibility of the divine beings. It's not like...
Again, nobody said that they were divisible.
The Father possesses it, and he just sort of shuttles it out to the Son, and then you have arguments as to then whether the Father, the Son, then give that to the Spirit, or whether the Father alone gives the Spirit inspiration, and all the rest of that argumentation that takes place at that point, which once was the stuff of dinner conversations across the Christian world, and now I wonder what percentage. I mean, Eastern Orthodox folks know about it because it's sort of definitional to them, but man, most folks in the West know nothing whatsoever about that whole discussion. People went to war over things like that in the past. But again, this is called On Not Three Gods. It's in the volume that contains the writings of Gregory of Nyssa. Some search engines might pull up Abladius, Abladius, if you want to try to find it and look at it yourself.
So notice he never actually explains what cause means. He never actually explains what cause means, that entire thing.
And so I'd want to look very carefully at exactly what Muslims. You just destroy faith. Well worth expanding on some of that stuff. But anyway, point being, the idea is, well, Gregory is talking about the Father is not caused, the Son is caused. And so I'd want to look very carefully at exactly what the what anaiteos means, what presbuon means, and exactly how it's being utilized and what's being asserted there. But in light of...
So he wants to look at what those terms mean. So this was meant to be addressing what those terms mean, and he never actually told you what St. Gregory means. So he read the quote, and then he said, well, he must be meaning something else, even if I can't tell you what he means. Well, I'm telling you what it means. I did a whole now 2-hour stream on it, okay? I'm telling you what he means. And I've been telling you. Now, point is this, again, like I said, I've given primary sources. I've given secondary sources for everything I've said. Dr. White hasn't given any of that other than merely only appealing to himself as the arbiter of truth on the matter. Again, I challenge Dr. White to debate me on this. His position will not stand scrutiny in a debate in a cross-examination section, and I can guarantee you that. Okay? And now from a Muslim perspective, our argument is this. Our argument is very simple. 1, Aseity is a necessary attribute of God. 2, the Nicene Creed results in the Son and the Spirit not possessing Aseity. 3, therefore the Son and the Spirit cannot be God. Very simple. Okay? Very simple. Now, Dr. White has a problem because he already locked himself into the position in the debate when he said that aseity is a necessary attribute of God. So now he's trying to fight for the fact that he still thinks the Son and the Spirit are ase because he agrees with me that it's a necessary attribute of God. But guess what? History's not on his side. So now Dr. White still has 2 options, and the Muslim has a problem with both of them. First option, affirm the Nicene Creed and admit that the Son and the Spirit are not ase, and yet they're still God. That's a problem because you yourself have admitted that they can't be God unless they're ase, because you said it's a necessary attribute of God. We would agree. That's why we reject the Nicene Creed and the whole Trinity anyway. Second thing is, you can affirm the Nicene Creed and make your own thing that's ahistorical and say that it means something else, something like how the constitutional revisionists do. They say, oh yeah, well they wrote this, but they meant something else, or no, yeah, they meant that, but we affirm it and we want to say that it really in today's age, it means something entirely different. That's basically what you're doing. Or you can be like William Lane Craig and Ryan Mullins and say, no, you're right, Jake. That's what they meant, but they were wrong because we agree with you. Aseity is a necessary attribute, and therefore the Nicene Creed has to be wrong. I think if you go that route, you've got a major historical problem by the fact that the entire church, up until the past couple hundred years, has not only taught the doctrine of divine processions, but has also believed in it. And so if that's the case, how do you explain how Orthodox Trinitarian theology, Nicene theology, has got the Trinity so fundamentally wrong since the beginning of its inception from the Nicene Creed all the way up until the present day and age? You have a historical problem on your hands. Now, if anybody wants to go into more detail on this, I do have a discussion and interview with Dr. Ryan Mullins on my channel on the Nicene Creed, where he argues the very same thing, and we go through in much detail his paper on this issue. Now, let me see here. Abnasam sent a super sticker, $1.99. Thank you very much. MashaAllah. May Allah reward you for that. With that being said, guys, tomorrow, if you want to get in on the members only live stream, tomorrow I will be having the monthly members only live stream at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which will be 6:30 p.m. UK time, and it will be for a full hour, and only members of either Patreon or YouTube will get an exclusive link to that, and you'll be able to either come on stream directly and ask me questions, or you will be able to send comments, questions in the comment section of the live chat if you're not able to come on video. So do consider becoming either a patron or a YouTube member. Really helps out, and provides a lot of support for me and the channel here. And you'll receive those members only live streams. Besides that, always, guys, remember to hit that like button. Give this a thumbs up button. Really helps with the YouTube algorithms. The same thing as live chat comments, as well as comments after the video. Make sure you leave those. Helps with the algorithms. If you can't help financially, that's totally understandable and fine. Also, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't hit that subscribe button already, what are you doing listening to my 2-hour rants? I mean, hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so that you can get notified of future streams, as well as share it on your social media platforms. No matter how big, no matter how small your social media platforms are, do consider sharing this video as well as future videos. Really does help get the material out there. Any little bit helps. We got a new member right on the spot. So appreciate you becoming a member. I will see you tomorrow on the members only live stream since you've become become a member. Sufyan A, $24.99. Thank you. I enjoyed this. Appreciate that. Sufyan always supports me on the live streams with super chats. May Allah bless you. Really do appreciate that. So with that being said, guys, I appreciate you all for watching. I really do apologize for the people who watched it live and stuck it out, as well as the people who watch it later. I'll try to edit it out of the video if I'm able to do so, although I'm not really technologically savvy, so I don't know if I'll be able to do that after the video ends. But I apologize for the stuff in the beginning. I was having technical issues with the mic and the camera. Then when I got that figured out, then I was having internet connections and it was buffering. I had to go on and off the stream 2 or 3 times. So if you don't want to see that, kind of fast forward the first 20, 30 minutes or so. I really do apologize for that. So I appreciate you guys sticking it out and watching here until the end. With that being said, I'll see all my members from Patreon and YouTube tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Until next time, for everybody else, which will be probably sometime next week. I'm not sure exactly what day. I'll be doing another video. Just be on the lookout for that. And once again, thanks for the continued support, guys. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.